Hello, hello. We are live. Very exciting. Week 2. For those who don't know me, I'm Brooke Brown of What Brooke Spent, and this is the Secure the Bag Book Club, where we talk about books that are nonfiction for beginner investors who want to acquire assets. And right now, we're in week 2, and we are talking about intellectual property. We are going over the book You Are an IP Company by Dr. Carrie Oberbrenner and Catherine Rubino. So this is what the book looks like. Before everyone gets in, I just wanted to kind of give that announcement because, when the stream goes live later, want to make sure that those details are covered. So there you go. Before anybody gets here, I also want to point out that last week's stream is live on my YouTube page. The channel is What Brooke Spent. Very excited that people have reached out and been, really excited about the book club and really excited about what we're covering. They said that the content that we've been sharing has been valuable, so I'm very excited about that. And yes, here we go. And I'm going to take down my hair, actually, because it's driving me nuts. So we're going to have a low ponytail while we wait for other people to join. So I have a story to tell. So the story that I have is, so I am in banking. I work for a credit union, and the characters that come in the bank are, I guess this is probably true of all banks, but particularly this bank that I work for is, I don't know, it's we get some characters, right? And anyways, so I wanted to share the pettiest transaction that I had yesterday. So a guy walks in, and he's got this look of like determination on his face, right? And he's like, "Oh, I want to make a deposit into my checking and savings account." So I'm like, "Okay, yeah, sure." That's not what I said. I'm obviously more professional than that, but I'm like, "Yes, sir. Let me pull up your account." Wonderful. And so he tells me his name, he gives me his identification, all that good stuff, and I pull up his account. His account has, in his checking, it has $0. And then in his savings, it has -$5. So I'm like, well, it's a good thing that you're coming in to make a deposit, sir. I didn't say that, of course, but that's what I'm thinking. So anyways, he goes and he's like, I'm like, okay, so, whenever you're ready, sir, you can hand me that deposit and I'll process it. It'll be good to go. This man plops down a nickel. Yes, 5 cents. He plops down a nickel and he's like, I want to put 1 cent, dead serious too. He's like, I want to put 1 cent in my checking and 4 cents in my savings. I'm like, where's the cameras? Like, am I being pranked? But no, he's so serious. I'm like, all right, well, that's what we're going to do. Now, mind you, also in my head, because this was a very busy day, and like everyone's just like shuffling in the bank, and like we're trying to get the line down as quickly as possible, making sure nobody has to wait too long. And this man wants to put in a nickel. Now, mind you, I'm thinking to myself, like, I wonder if he's one of those guys that like, how like the manifestation woo woo gurus and stuff will be like, walk around a rich neighborhood because that's going to be you someday. Or, I don't care if it's $1, put it in your bank account because one day it's not going to be $1, it's going to be $1 million. And, kind of that kind of vibe. So I'm wondering if he was just like, you know what, I may be broke, but I've got 5 cents and that's got to count for something. So anyways, I want you to have the confidence and what is it, the Delulu sense of self that this 5 cent guy had. And that's my story. Welcome. Welcome to the Secure the Bag Book Club again. This is week 2. We are covering the book, You Are an IP Company. Okay, so, and one other story from work while I have you. So this one's a much more positive story. So this guy he walks up to the counter and he's like, oh, I'd like to withdraw like $11,000. And he had very specific like denominations or notes or whatever that he wanted, a mix of bills, right, that he wanted to get out. I'm like, okay, great. Now, when you, now a lot of people don't know this, but when you take out a certain level of money, it's actually like $10,000 and 1 cent to be exact. If you take out that much money in cash and walk out the bank with it, we have to report it to the government, basically. And so when we report it to the government, one of the parts of like the report is like you ask like, what your profession is, what your title is, and what industry you're in. The idea is that it's supposed to help with like, cutting down on like money laundering and scams and all that kind of stuff. So I'm chatting the guy up. I'm trying to like, get information for the report. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm a pilot. I'm in aviation. He's like a pilot for like United, right? And I'm like, oh, that's great. So, what's the money for? That was out of curiosity. They don't ask you that in the report. And he's like, oh, me and my wife were starting an ATM business. I'm like, say more. So he's like, yeah, I met this guy at a bar on a layover. And this is a true story, by the way. I'm not making this up. So he's like, I met this guy and he's chatting me up about like how he, owns all these ATMs and, how the business model works. And, so we bought an ATM. A lot of people don't know that you can buy an ATM, as a private citizen, and you can, you fill it with your own money and you make money off of the like surcharges. So that's what he was doing with like $11,000. And I was like, that's really cool. You come back and you tell me how that business went. I want to know. I want to follow up. So that's something that like, one of the things that like kind of inspired me to start this book club is that there are so many ways to make money. There are so many business models out there. And asset acquisition is part of that, approach to being in business for yourself, to cash flowing, all that good stuff. So that's the end of my story. Okay, so let's get into this week's section of the book. So we covered chapters, not chapters. They don't have chapter numbers in this book. They just have titles. Ugh. But I will tell you that we are in part 2, steps. We are covering step 2, which also starts with the Krispy Kreme Donuts is an IP company chapter. And we're going all the way through to the chapter that starts EOS is an IP company. Step 4, normalize, integrate healthy IP hygiene into your everyday operations. So this is pages 61 through, I think it's like 100. Anyways, okay. So one of the first things that I wanted to talk about was the quote in the book that says, "The truth is, we're not always sure which of our intellectual property will fizzle or sizzle." And I'm like, you know what, that's true, because when people, secure their IP, maybe they have an invention or something like that, and they, they don't know if that invention is going to take off, it's going to innovate, it's going to make them billions of dollars, or if it's going to, just be something that they have and, maybe, they use it for something or maybe they don't. So I thought that was really cool. And they bring up the example of how there are, companies that went on Shark Tank and those companies were rejected by the sharks and they end up, succeeding. Like things like the Ring doorbell was on Shark Tank and was then later purchased by Amazon in 2018 for over $1 billion. Another one is Kodiak Cakes, which currently over $200 million in annual sales and are sold by large retailers like Whole Foods, Target, and Costco. So don't get up on your dreams or your intellectual property. Hello. Yes. So I also wanted to talk about on page, let's see. And I can't see you if you're on the live stream. I can't see who's here unless you post in the chat. So make sure that you interact in the chat and let me know where you're tuning in from, your first impressions of the book, all that good stuff. Let's get it going. And if you're watching this not live, go ahead and leave a comment in the video stream post that I will leave up on my channel. Okay, so I was very relieved that we finally got to the point on page 78 where they, co-authors, give the definitions of different, like the big categories of intellectual property. So things like copyrights, trademarks, patents, what other ones? Trade secrets, that's another one too. So I guess I'm not going to go over them because you can, kind of, one, you're already reading it in the book, but also two, you can just Google the types of IP. But I guess I'll just, briefly kind of skim the surface and say the copyrights cover, original works like music, art, stuff like that, and books, and are granted to the originators of those works. I also looked it up, and if you upload on social media, so for example, YouTube, right? This video that you're watching now is my intellectual property because you automatically get granted a copyright when you are the originator of the works. So I thought that was cool. Next thing, trademarks include any word, name, symbol, or design used to identify and distinguish goods or services. And they mentioned that you can trademark smells. I said, you can trademark smells? But yeah, they said Play-Doh, the distinctive aroma of Play-Doh is trademarked. So that's cool. And then you have patents, which are for inventions, and trade secrets, which are things that are proprietary and are used to enhance a brand and are kept confidential. So things like, the secret formulas for recipes and stuff like that. The classic example is Coca-Cola, right? Their secret recipe. Yeah. So I thought that was really cool. Yeah. So the types of IP is really worth, having that distinction, I think. And then also I looked into the cost of IP, and this was something that I wanted to really reassure you about, because I know when I first started looking into how much does IP cost as far as acquiring it as an asset from other businesses. So you basically, buy it from, a business that may be going out of business or something like that. For example, that can cost, hundreds of thousands of dollars. But, and then a patent, which protects your invention, for example, for 20 years, that can cost about $20,000 plus, the services of an attorney. But then I found out that trademarks are significantly cheaper. They are about $3,000. And then copyrights are even cheaper. They're about $350 for the initial application fee for one, piece of copyrighted content or, a work, right? So I was like, okay, cool. So 350, that's doable for, that's like if you saved for 3 months, that's like, or, 12 weeks or whatever, that's like roughly $29, $30 a week. So you could give up lunch for a couple of days and you could potentially get a copyright of something. So there's that. Now, the interesting thing that I also looked into was, so another story. My mom had an invention. I'm not going to tell you what, but it was related to hair care. And this was when I was in I think it was middle school. And she was doing all this research and creating designs and looking into materials. And I remember she was even, she even consulted with the local fire department about fire resistant materials. It was really cool. I was very proud of her. In that time, we looked into patents, and one of the myths that goes around is this idea of the poor man's patent. Have y'all ever heard about the poor man's patent? Let me know in the comments if you've ever heard of the poor man's patent or patent. So anyway, let me explain what the poor man's patent is. Basically, what you do is you have an invention and you have design for it or whatever, the schematics, whatever. And you take a copy of that design, you put it in an envelope, you seal it, and you mail it to yourself through the post office, through the U.S. Postal Service. And because it is sent through certified mail, it's time-stamped. And then because it's sealed, the idea is that it's, authentic, it's genuine. I looked into, last week, I looked into whether the poor man's patent holds up in a court. It does not. I'm so sad about that. People were, I don't know, thinking that they can just mail themselves something and, that'll be legit and that'll be enough when, they don't have the money to come up with a patent. But apparently not. But the thing that is legit is a thing called a provisional patent. And for a cheaper price, you can get a provisional patent. And I think, let me see. Hold on, let me look at my little slide here. Yes. So for a provisional patent for a small entity, the cost is $140. And what it does is it covers you for a year of legal protection, and until you can get enough money to do the big deal, the big $20,000 patent. So you have the provisional patent, and then so a small entity is $140, but even better is a micro entity, which qualifies as a company that has less than 500 employees, has not been named as an inventor on more than 4 previously filed patent applications, and then I think there's also if you meet the certain income level. If you don't make but a certain amount of money, then you can qualify as a micro entity. And that cost is only $70. So we're talking about the cost of intellectual property, and we're kind of getting, we're getting closer and closer to it being exceptionally accessible to the average person, average inventor, average creator, all that good stuff. So I thought that was really cool. I don't think they talk about that provisional patent in the book, because the book to this point has been very salesy. I must warn you, it has been very salesy about their software app. It's called Instant IP. And I kid you not, every chapter, every end of every section, it says, and you can find the free class or you can download the app at instantip dot whatever it is. And, or you can scan the QR code and it's very like, oh God, come on. I get it. You want us to, buy the product, whatever. So that was kind of annoying, but it still has good information. So I still recommend that you read the book. The second thing that I wanted to talk about was taxation, because in the book there was here it is. It says income from IP is classified as royalty income as opposed to W-2 income. Since this is passive income, it can be offset by other passive losses such as those from real estate. So the thing about taxation is that W-2, just your average employee, doesn't have as many tax breaks as, say, a business would, or someone who owns property, real estate, someone who owns stocks, all that kind of stuff. And is by design. I made a TikTok video about this. It's Taxes 101. You can see it on my TikTok page, Secure the Bag, Brooke. Yes, secure, that's the handle. And anyways, I thought it was very important that we talked about taxation. I'm just skimming the surface here, but when you have assets, you do have to consider your taxation strategy. And the benefit of having these assets is that they aren't taxed as heavily as your job income would be. So I thought that was really cool. Yeah, so those are my impressions from this chapter, or this section of the book. I know I kind of went through it a little quickly this time around because I wanted to make sure that the broadcast was a little shorter because last week was like 45 minutes, something like that. And so this week I wanted to make it shorter so you could get through the content a little quicker. But it talked about this section talked about like some more examples of companies that have exercised their IP, how certain businesses, kind of give things away for free, but then, sell the implementation of that, strategy or process or whatever. And a lot of people don't realize that processes, whatever, can be protected as intellectual property. So I thought that was really cool too. So, yeah, in the comments, let me know your impressions of this section of the book as you're reading it. Would love to know what you guys are thinking. Are your wheels turning as far as, things that you would consider protecting? Would really love to see, what you're, thinking about as you're reading this material. And if you're also going out and looking at other sources, like I know as I was reading this section, I was like, what big cases have like influenced intellectual property law, So of course I was like, oh, Rihanna, she had an intellectual property, case and won, or Louis Vuitton and all that kind of stuff. It was a really fun deep dive. So that's, something that you could consider doing on your free time as well. Anyways, meet me on my YouTube channel here on the streams Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can meet me on TikTok in between time, Secure the Bag Brooke. You can sign up for my newsletter, What Brooke Spent, on Substack, and also the schedule for what chapters, pages, whatever, that we're covering which week is on my website, whatbrookespent.com/events. All right, I will talk to y'all next week. Take care, and remember, tell the others.